Well, unfortunately, the adversity that I had to overcome uh, from my past was the sexual abuse that I had suffered as a as a young kid throughout my grade 7 school year. I It started when I was um, 11 years old, and that was the beginning of the grade 7 school year. Um, and I was an altar boy in the fall of 1977, and which was in the parish that was right beside the grade school that I was attending, and was befriended by this a priest, Father Bruno Primavera, and you know, as it seems like a lot of the stories go, that I think they really try and they have a real nose for sniffing out um, that vulnerability in, I would say, a young person of that age. And uh, so that, that time in my life, obviously, it's a developmental period. Um, uh, it had such a big impact as far as I was my home life at the time. I was like I had a great home life. It was a very loving home life, and um, but there was like I grew up with my mom and my two sisters, and of course my dad. And my dad was I would never say an absent father, but I would call him a weekend dad. And he worked nights as a printer, and uh, I didn't get to see him much. And he was always this elusive mystery to me. And um, I'd always my dad was a big custom car fan, and he wasn't a sports guy. I didn't grow up with sports, and I always chased him downstairs to the garage where his beloved 1932 Ford sedan was. So it was a very again, he was a mystery to me, but I ached for that connection. Um, so those times that I did have with him were such a had such an impact on me. And so throughout that grade 7 school year, at a certain point in time, my parents had split up, and I didn't know why. Obviously, I'm 11 years old, and my male connection was gone. So not that it's a bad thing, but I was left with my mom and my two sisters, which was great, and it was still a loving household. But that male connection, I really, um, it was a real absentness in me. It was that sort of uh, hole, one would say, in me. And so I found that in Bruno Primavera, being an altar boy. And, uh, you know, whatever he saw in me, whatever he sniffed out, uh, I will never know. But I know those guys have a real keen sense of whatever to do that. And of course, I loved the attention that he gave me. I mean, I see it now for what it was. And but it was a real. I mean, obviously, first of all, he's a father, father
Mm.
uh, Bruno Primavera, and so that just I latched onto that. And he was so kind to me and loving, and always a hand on the shoulder, and for a job well done. And again, I really have to reiterate that I see it for what it is and what it was then. And but I lapped it up. I lapped all that up because of the absentness at home that I felt uh, because my dad was gone. So those those times with him, those pats on the back and the hand on the shoulder, um, they turned into these in the change room sort of moments where I was left alone after mass. I used to serve morning mass that was started at 7 a.m. And of course, the other altar boy, there was two of us with the priest. And, of course, that other altar boy would be gone because everybody wanted to hit the schoolyard before the school bell rang. But I was so engaged with him in him and being so kind and enigmatic and such a powerful presence at that time in my life that I wanted to hang out with him. So so the I could say the fumblings in the change room that started to turn into hugs and wandering hands and kisses on the face and that this sort of thing. I never thought anything of it. I honestly never thought anything of it, and I was allowed to drink the altar wine. I remember asking what he drank in mass, and he said that it was wine, and I could have some if I wanted to. And I was so honored because he allowed me to do that, and that became a regular thing in the change room of the altar boys, and of course the priests change room also was in the back too. So um, again, there was that really like sense of purpose, that sense of that someone loved me, and it was a male figure. And but we all know now, what the intentions were, and this happened throughout my grade 7 school year. And it came to a point um, towards the end of the school year uh, that we were in the change room, and I remember him asking me that um, if I like to swim. And of course, being a almost 12-year-old, or 12, I was 12 then. By then, of course, I love to swim. And I said yes, of course. And he had this bathing suit for me to try on if I wanted. And of course, I'm getting a gift. I'm getting a gift from Father, right? And so next thing we're in the church rectory, and of course, I distinctly remember then thinking, I know it's time to, I got to get back to school, that kind of thing. But I really want this bathing suit, and it's such an honor. And we ended up back in where I guess his room was, and there was a lot of things packed in boxes, like he was moving. And in hindsight, he was literally leaving the parish to go back to America. And so I had tried this bathing suit on, and it was in the bathroom, and I came out, of course, with just my t-shirt and the bathing suit on over my underwear. And I remember him saying, he was sitting on the bed, and he said, "You didn't have to leave your underwear on." And I said, well, that's the way my mom has always told us to try on a bathing suit. It was all about, you go buy a bathing suit. It was about hygiene. You still do that stuff nowadays. And he said, "You're right. You should always listen to what your mom says." And he had patted the bed, like, to come sit down. And I had no idea. It was just so, I was so enamored to be in his presence and to be finally sitting I don't think it really clicked in until we were on the bed and he was, pretty much over me at that time. And then, like, there was like something wrong, something's up now. And I just, but by then it was too late. There was a moment of no return. And those wandering hands were under my t-shirt, and Kisses were on the lips now. And I distinctly still remember his face, that big grinning face over me. And he could have been salivating for all I know. Because when I think of it now, he probably was in his mind. And, you know, hands down down my pants and trying to penetrate me with a finger. And I think at that point, I think what may have scared him was the school bell. And I heard the school bell from the rectory, of course, lying there on my back, and him almost right on me, and feeling, unfortunately, feeling an erection from him. And I think the bell scared him, and he stopped. And you know, to this day, I don't know, you know, if the bell hadn't have gone off, what else would have happened. But he wrote me a note. He wrote me a note for my teacher, and um, off I went, and I left, and I went back to my grade 7 class, and I was walked across an empty schoolyard because everybody was already in class by then, and I went to my class and handed my teacher this note. And I had such a crush on my grade 7 teacher. She was my best. She was my most favorite grade school teacher. And you know, she looked at it and read it, and said, "Okay, take your seat." And you know, I read that note. I read that note walking across the schoolyard, and it said, "Please excuse David for being late. He was helping me." And I never forgot that letter. Um, so what followed after that, the fallout uh, from all of that was, um, you know, it started with a real disconnection in school. Um, I remember being taken out of class in grade 8 to do some test, like I had some um, maybe like a learning disability. And I thought, why is it just me that's being given this special treatment? By then, the dissociative behavior that I was experiencing. I mean, I daydreamed a lot back then. I just hated authority, uh, the teachers, the principals, and to top it all off, I was given a note. Like there was two of my buddies, three of us all hung out together, and they had passed me a note one day saying that they didn't want to hang out with me anymore. And I didn't know why. I don't know why to this date. And I know it's a real challenging part in kids' life, grade school, and all the, you know, very confusing. But and of course, not knowing what had happened, it only furthered my descent, I guess I could say, into um, I'm not good enough, um, the low self worth, what's wrong with me. Um, so so those feelings, you know, just carried on um, towards high school, and of course, reckless, destructive behavior in school that started in grade school. Um, my dad was finally back in the household by then, uh, and you know, it wasn't long before I had left my first high school. Almost asked to leave because I was implicated with the theft of audiovisual equipment, and I just wasn't getting high school. Um, and I remember the only sports I ever took was wrestling, and for some reason, and I'm saying this, um, I'm being completely what's the word I'm looking for? Anyway, rolling around on the mat with guys just wasn't feeling right, and there was something up with that, and I just it wasn't quite for me. And when my dad didn't come to one of my matches, I just said, you know, the hell with it, And but I had met, a guy in school. We started hanging out. I left all my grade school buddies behind, and his name was John, and we were hanging out a lot. And we'd ride the bus together and go back to his place. And I found out that his interests in me were more than just being a friend. And him and I ended up having this sexual relationship that I didn't see there was anything wrong with that, because I had already, my first sexual experience was with someone that was 20 years older than me, and I was only 12. And it was with a man. So I thought just that's what boys do. And so that carried on until my mom, he was at my place one day, and my mom walked in on us, and John was staying over for dinner one night, and she walked in on us but didn't say anything. And anyway, my folks had sat us down, and my mom told John's mom, and my dad, finally my dad said to me, I just said to John, I'll just never be able to look at David as a man anymore. And those words crushed me, because the guy that I was so assiduously bent on getting to know thought I was homosexual. So that started the rift between my dad and I. At a very young age, I was 17. And I continued on to another high school where I was able to take auto shop. And, I was opened up to a whole new world of friends. And those friends were the cool guys that were taking auto shop too. And those guys did drugs. And, I was introduced at a young age. Well, not, I guess you wouldn't consider it young nowadays, but, I was 17 years old, and I had started my journey into drugs, and couldn't figure out what was wrong with me, why no one liked me. When actually it's not that they didn't like me. It was, Dave was always the trashy mess that was upset when we were partying. And, I ended up using alone. I started using alone in my room. Not in front of my parents, obviously, but I'd be very high coming home and going in my room. And there was always that, I had this interest in girls. All the girls were noticing me in later high school, grade 11 and 12. And it was 11 when I started the other high school. And it was like I was so interested in girls, but my head was saying, like, what are you doing? Like, you're a fag. And I don't mean that and I don't mean saying that in a bad way or anything. It's that was my head. And I was so frightened. My head was all over the place back then. And so there was a lot of confusion. The sexual confusion in me was so huge. And so I couldn't wait to get out of school. I couldn't wait to finish high school, and got my grade 12. I opted for getting my diploma in the mail because I couldn't just stomach going to the prom kind of thing. And I started my career with the railway fairly soon after high school. It was close to a year after high school, because all the railway required was a grade 12 diploma. Even though I was so amazed by academically driven careers like an architect or forestry, or, I just thought I wasn't good enough to continue on with school, let alone even becoming a mechanic, because I'm such a car guy, but I'm not a mechanic. And so I don't want to say I just took what they gave me, because I had a really great career with the railway, with Canadian Pacific. And in fact, I didn't think I'd last 5 years, let alone almost 35 years. But as I hired on there, uh, I was doing drugs, riding the rails. Uh, I think of it now as CP's tracks go through Toronto, North Toronto, and the times that I was high going through Toronto, and I used to think, God, if any of these people that lived around here, and one of the neighborhoods was Rosedale, thinking, oh my God, like if they only knew. And that thought was always with anybody I met. If they only knew me, that they wouldn't like me. Um, and I had a lot of fear of failure and fear of success, and I was always in that limbo. And drug abuse is what really calmed everything, so I thought. And as the '80s moved into the '90s, I had taken a trip to England, and I was uh, visited someone there that means a lot to me, and she's still here. She's here now, and but over a very long journey, and uh, she got pregnant, and that didn't work out. I don't have any kids, but I think the emotional impact of thinking that I could have been a father, and but I thought that my childhood was stolen from me, and I felt like much like a childlike. I'm not childish, but I can really act like a kid a lot, and I love it. And it was something that I still feel it in me to this day. And so it's like I missed that opportunity to be a dad. I mean, I'm 57 years old now, and I feel that. I feel that. So, so I was introduced to. I ended up marrying someone in the early '90s that introduced me to crack cocaine, and that became my lifelong friend. My marriage failed for obvious reasons after 5 years, and I moved out of. I grew up in Scarborough. I moved out of Scarborough and came to the West End in '99 in Toronto, and I've been here ever since. But um, geographic change doesn't change anything, and I brought me with me, and boy, I brought everything, yeah, and all the destruction that crack addiction uh, has with it. And even though I didn't, fortunately, I didn't die from it, but I had a spiritual death, and it feels like an emotional death. Um, and so I just carried on, not being able to fill this gigantic hole in me. And I attended my first. I turned myself in at work um, in 2001. They sent me to a treatment center downtown, and that was we used to call it the spin dry because it was only 3 weeks. And I came out of there thinking, okay, like I got a handle on this, and my counselor saying, you can't drink, and I'm like, what are you talking about? Like of course I can drink, and so I had a really misguided concept of what it was to be clean, and so I left there, and of course I went right back to what I was doing, and got involved with someone else again, and it was more of I took a prisoner. I didn't take a partner. I took a prisoner, and involved her in what I was doing too, and that was a real mess too. And went to my second treatment center. This time, I guess they thought 10 weeks would do, up way up north in Sudbury. I turned myself in again at work. I was desperate. I was desperate to be clean. because I just didn't, it felt like it wasn't me. Something's wrong, something's deeply wrong, and I didn't know how to approach it. In my first treatment center, it's really when I had said to them that of what had happened. And I'm going to go back like 10 years just very quickly, because in 1988, when you started hearing about the Mount Cashel orphanage in Newfoundland, and the abuse that was suffered by boys there, it clicked in like 10 years later, and it's like, wow, like that happened to me. And then that was it. I sat with that. I knew that for the first time I heard the word sexual abuse. And I told my parents in the mid 90s. I invited them over for dinner one night. This is when I was married, and told my parents. And I was very drunk, and yelled at my father. And he left, and I was yelling at him down the hallway of the apartment building that we lived in, told him to get the fuck out of here. And it was a real messy, messy night. But so I left that treatment center, the 10-week treatment center, and you know what? It really didn't. I really didn't stick with it, and I just trudged on. You know, I trudged on with work, the fear at work of being fired. My attendance record was awful. Um, Trying desperately to stay clean, thinking I could do it on my own and white knuckle it, and um, uh, you know, finally I got to a point where um, I started attending 12-step meetings, and stayed clean. I stayed clean for a couple of years, from 2011 to um, 2013. And you know, I had a window of opportunity to see what life was like on the other side, so to speak. My spiritual journey started in the early 2000s, and it was with a Wayne Dyer book. It was called Manifest Your Destiny, and it was something my older sister had given me, and I looked at it. It's like, oh, great, a self-help book. I don't need that. And I filed it on the bookshelf. And one day, when I was in one of the depths of my despair the next morning, drug hungover, that book might as well have jumped off the bookshelf, and I took it, and that started my spiritual journey. So it's been, God, it's been 20 years since, at least, being accustomed to the literature and uh, what it's like to be in that mindset of spirituality. So I had got involved with someone in the 12-step program that had two sons, two small boys, and they thought I was the best stepdad going, and that also didn't work out, even though I still kind of contact them today, and they reach out, and again, that emptiness of maybe I could have been a dad, and you know, I'm quite sure I would have been, maybe, if, you know, the abuse didn't happen. It's such a momentous ball of effects from sexual abuse. I was given a book by Bob McCabe, and it was adults that had suffered childhood sexual abuse. And I still remember the page number. It's like page 127, and it was all the symptoms of sexual abuse. And I remember feeling so relieved at everything, all the bullet points. There must have been at least 20 bullet points of the effects of sexual abuse. And one of them was sexual confusion. And so there was that relief that it wasn't just all in my head, and I wasn't just feeling this way. I wasn't making it up. And so that relationship ended too, and I was getting closer to the end of my career, and you know, I've been very grateful that the railway had given me an ability to have a roof over my head. But I was a financial disaster for most of my career. When crack was introduced, I was only 6 years into my career, and that was a constant until the end in 2020. And uh, I ended up reuniting with Lisa, the woman that I had met, or not met, but had gone to visit in England back in 1991. And but I hadn't figured myself out yet either. Like I thought, okay, well, that's great, and I'm I'll just stop all this, but it didn't. Like the whole um, before she even arrived, I was pulled over one night coming from uh, a neighborhood in the West End, and I was drunk and I had crack on me, and I was pulled over by the police doing 153 kilometers an hour on the Gardiner because I couldn't wait home. I couldn't wait to get home to get to that pipe. And anyway, I just thought that was it. Like I'm done now. And here's me at the in August of 2020. My last trip with the railway was Labor Day 2020, and 2 weeks before that, I was busted for drinking and driving. Again, 28 years ago, was busted for the same thing as a younger man, and for some reason, when they took me to the police station, I had put the crack in my shoe, and the cops found it, and they didn't know what it was. And I thought, I guess you could call it maybe a divine intervention, because I'm like, you guys do. I'm thinking you guys don't know what this is, and he's like pinching it, looking at it, and anyway. So I didn't get charged with the possession of narcotics, fortunately. Knock on wood, and yeah. So I was charged with that, and had to have an ignition lock on my truck and all that good stuff, and it brought me to you. So it's bringing me here today. I managed to get through this journey, and meditation's part of my life now. I've been clean for almost 2 years. Again, this June I'll be clean for 2 years. So the creation in my mind is going to be this book, and how I can sort of use it as to put my to put my story down in words, and hopefully affect other people's lives that are struggling and can identify with this. My wish would be, because of what my past is supposed to be, my wisdom. So if I can take this experience that I've had throughout, called my life, my book's going to be called a Journey of the Soul. But if I can take this experience and share it with people, and be a positive influence, have a positive impact on anybody that's struggling with this kind of thing. The unfortunate part is that it's a hard thing for men to talk about, and I'm so grateful for the RSI, Bob McCabe's recovery speaking initiative, and when we, when what was there was about 5 of us, including Bob, that started the Thursday night Zoom meeting. I think of it now, and like we all seemed like pioneers then, doing something like this that no one else had ever done, and it was a real cathartic effect. It was real, like waiting to be let into the room was what on Thursday evenings was like coming home, and it was a real safe place. I eventually read my story to those men, and it was a big weight off my shoulders, writing it and reading it. So as far as the positive outlook and positive impact, I could see I can see myself affecting others in a very positive way through sharing my story, my experience, strength, and hope, they call it, uh, that I used to hear it be called in the 12-step meetings. And yeah, that's what I see. I personally see myself on a stage telling my story, and I've seen that for a while. So how that looks or how that's going to come about, I don't know, but it feels very real, and I'm more than willing to uh, pass on that power of positivity through the wisdom of the past.
Well, Dave, I just want to welcome you to our stage, to our little podcast here, and in the future with what we're building here with Recovering Speaking Initiative, this beautiful roundtable where we're going to share people's hardships and experiences in sexual assault and how that's turned into such a positive light, much like you, this wonderful book that you're writing. That I agree with you. It's hard for men to share when something's gone, such as sexual assault or abuse of any kind, because we're always supposed to be so like stoic and I think once men start sharing and we start reading books like yours, you're going to like just open up people and open up other men and teach them how to move forward. And I just want to thank you for sharing such a beautiful, not a beautiful story. It's beautiful that you can tell it. It's not a beautiful story. It's a hard story, even for me to listen to. It was a hard story. I could not imagine living it or telling it. And I think you're so wonderful and brave for sharing that with us. And I think you're wonderful and brave for sharing your story with strangers in order to help them. And I just want, I thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for saying so, and it just gives me like when you said sharing your story with strangers, I don't. It's such a it is a powerful story, and I love that it's got a I don't know. I guess I can say a bit of a happy ending, and I don't know where my journey's taking me, but it's all about the great unknown for me. And
Perfect.
whatever it is around the corner, I'm ready, willing, and able. So
Yep.
again, that sort of feeling of being on a stage and sharing my story, whether it's big or small, maybe it'll turn into a screenplay. I don't know.